Hi there, this is Llarold. Today I'm going to be talking about the Netherlight Crucible from the perspective of a Brewmaster Monk. If you want a refresher on how the Netherlight Crucible actually works, I made a video about that during the PTR, and despite all the disclaimers I made that things might change, nothing actually did, so it's still accurate. One of the big differences that tanks have in making their recommendations on the Netherlight Crucible from your normal DPS specs is that we don't really have simulation craft modules available. Unlike in the situation where we can say, well, this relic trait's worth 6 item level, this one's worth 4, and so on, making definitive recommendations is fairly difficult. As a result, I'm going to try and make separate offensive and defensive recommendations so that you have a clear picture of what traits you want to prioritize for your given situation. Because the Netherlight Crucible has so much RNG, I can't just say, always choose this. So with that being said, always choose Facepalm. Facepalm is a must-have in every single relic. It can be on the relic itself or in the tree, but it is far and away the most important trait to have, and you want to have 7 ranks in it at all times. Here are a couple of other Brewmaster reminders. Unlike other tanks, Brewmaster damage is based entirely off of attack power, so the weapon is actually just a big stat stick. Unfortunately, it's a big stat stick with haste and mastery, which are the two worst stats. As a result, traits are a lot more important than item level, and dropping some weapon item level for better traits may not be a bad idea. So let's go ahead and jump into the Netherlight Crucible traits. There are 6 light traits and 6 void traits, and you'll always be choosing between a light trait and a void trait in the second tier. These traits can be incredibly strong, more than the weapon traits down in tier 3 even, so you want to base your path through the weapon on both the tier 2 and the tier 3 rewards. Without further ado, here's the trait priorities. Now let's go through and break down these traits. First up, let's compare the stat traits. Crit and versatility are Brewmaster's best stats, so Murderous Intent and Shocklight make the already great Concordance of the Legion Fall buff even better. Mastery is a good defensive stat against heavy melee damage, but pretty worthless against spell damage, and not really very good offensively in general. As a result, Master of Shadows falls in value a little bit. The Avoidance is extremely good when it applies, about 5% damage reduction from AoE spells, but there aren't enough scenarios to make it an absolute must-have. Haste is the worst stat overall, which makes Lightspeed pretty bad. Go ahead and skip it. Next up, let's compare the damage proc skills. Shadowbind and Chaotic Darkness basically do the same thing. Chaotic Darkness has a larger damage range, so RNG can take over a little bit, but they're tuned to deal very nearly the same damage and healing over the course of a fight. These are the 2 best damage proc traits because they provide damage and healing. Secure in the Light and Infusion of Light spend their procs either on damage or healing rather than doing both at the same time. They deal about 1% more damage or healing than Shadowbind and Chaotic Darkness, but because they're not doing both at once, they fall behind in overall value pretty quickly. Torment the Weak and Dark Sorrows come in as the 2 worst damage proc skills. They only deal damage, and the way that they work just doesn't really interact well with how tanks are designed. Torment the Weak is all about keeping a dot rolling on a single target. It really can be the best DPS trait for a lot of DPS classes, but because Brewmaster and tanks in general deal tons of AoE damage, your dot can fall off in pretty much any multi-target situation. In single-target scenarios, it's pretty great, but that usually is where tank damage is the weakest and least important. Dark Sorrows can do a lot of damage in AoE, but it has a really long timer from the moment it procs until it actually goes off. If you kill a target that has Dark Sorrows active, it will automatically explode and deal that AoE damage when it dies, so that is a silver lining. While it does a lot of damage in large-scale AoE, outside of that, it's really low damage and really low proc rate. And large-scale AoE just isn't that plentiful. Let's finish with the two defense-only traits, Refractive Shell and Light's Embrace. Refractive Shell is worth quite a bit more healing than any other trait, and because it offers shielding, it's not going to overheal either. Light's Embrace provides about as much healing on average as any of the other damage and healing proc traits. It can do more if you get lucky and get some overlap on the hot, but generally speaking, it's not too great. Unfortunately for both of these traits, neither of them has any kind of offensive component to round them out, and that's really a big strike against them. Now let's move on to artifact traits. Facepalm, as I said before, is far and away the most important trait, and everything else pretty much pales in comparison. After Facepalm, the three highest priority traits are Hot-Blooded, Potent Kick, and Draft of Darkness. Here are a couple of short priority lists for defensive and offensive weapon traits that you'll find in Tier 3. That pretty much covers it. If you have any questions, ask in the comments section below. Remember to like and subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter and Twitch. Thanks for watching. Bye!